And welcome to our webinar. My name is Pamela Gupta. I'm a member of RESIS AI, Trusted AI Affiliate, and our mission is to help develop AI securely and implement it responsibly. It is a big charter, and we'd like to obviously not something we can do alone. So this is a very big initiative with a lot of implications, and hence the topic today. Can AI be used for weaponizing data? So why is this an issue? Let me just start with the importance of AI. A quick check. Is my camera on? Can you see me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So AI is a strategic technology. There's no doubt about that. And it has vast implications because, like no other technology before, it is a data-dependent technology that learns, can be used for self-learning, can be used for no programming, and which means that it's not something that you have logic for, if then else, that if you have this, then you do this kind of a thing. It's also extremely complex, and there are a lot of different moving parts, which are, when we go back historically, when we built systems, we have not used the right controls in place from the beginning. And I'm seeing a semblance of that now, and that's what is the concern. Switching tracks. The importance and implications of AI. Why is it so strategic, and why is it so impactful? The economic impact of AI is going to be measured in trillions of dollars. So it is a very attractive from a lot of different perspectives for any company, any government, any nation state. And it is, I've talked about some numbers before, and you can always contact us to get the source and the more specifics. But right now, it is positioned to be raising global GDP by around $15 trillion in the next 10 years. Out of that, China is positioned and has been projected to have more than half of that projected growth. So it raises a lot of different points, and it clearly is a position from using this technology is not just it is not trivial, as you can imagine. And I want to talk a little bit about what are we doing today to protect not only our current, but also our future. I'm a cybersecurity and privacy strategist, and do admire the strategic approach China has taken on advancing their cybersecurity strategy and growth in AI, growth in quantum technology, but not necessarily the methods. And it brings risks to the rest of the world and the free democratic society. I'm going to go back to the origin of some of the history. This is a brief history slide on who I am, and you can always go back to the website and see my where I come from, what my track record has been in cybersecurity. Let's just go back to start from the beginning of some years back. And this is going back a lot, but very important to understand what is cyber warfare and what is the position of different countries, especially China. Starting with the National Security Commission on AI, what is the landscape for AI? Current threats advanced by AI systems, new threats from AI systems, threats to AI stacks themselves, and future threats via AI systems. I'm going to be spending time on the development of AI stacks, how it can be compromised and lead to implications and lead to outcomes that we may not be prepared for. So I'm going to be focusing on the third column here that the National Security Commission on AI has laid out, as well as the future threats from automating the consumption and the analysis of data, and what is this data that we are generating. And one really important differentiation I'd like to make right at the outset. When we're talking about data compromise, we sometimes focus only on data that has been breached. And that is very important, such as PII, such as data about who we are, where, what we the definition of PII as in personally identified but information. Sorry, I just got a shock, so that just give me a blur. We know what that is: social security numbers, national identity numbers. But compromise of that alone is not the risk I'm talking about that we can see coming from AI-based attacks. With and let me go more into it in some depth. So I'll be giving some more highlight on why just PII compromise is not enough. We need to know other facets of our life that we're handing over with data analytics and massive data that we are creating, and how it can actually come back to be a big problem. So how is China achieving important progress in the field of AI? Why is the field of AI so critical at a nation state and at a societal state? We'll go into more of that. I'm giving you an excerpt from China's plan to lead in AI, purpose, prospects, and problems by the authors here. I won't read all of them out, but just to excerpt why is this significant and why? So China has achieved important progress, and some of the rhetoric we saw 20 years ago from China, or even 10 years ago from China, about being the leaders in cybersecurity and was thought to be perhaps more aspirational. But there are some things that I'm going to be laying out which clearly show that their progress in the field of AI is not that aspirational, but they are showing tangible proof of that. And how did they get there is also really important. So I'll come back to this. Looking at the data side of, in 2017, IBM had released a report that 80% of the data, 90% of the data in the world had been generated in the past 2 years alone, which is 2015. Sorry, I have to ask my daughter to not make noise in the background. So since 2015 to 2017, they had seen that 90% of the data had been generated in 2 years. And I didn't look in the numbers for 2021, but I know it's not going to be any less. So what that means is when we have such massive amounts of data that is being generated, because a lot of times application and systems, we are generating data for business purpose, and business is not, or organizational purpose, or national, whatever the case may be. Because at times, one is not clear on what the anticipated use of that data might be, but that does become a major problem. And again, that's the purpose of talking about this. How is data generated and consumed? There isn't any facet of our life today we are not generating data. And where all you see smart or consumer, transportation, security, surveillance, anywhere we're seeing data generated or consumed is a area where we can be using AI for facilitating and making things much more better. Or also from the reverse side, some of you may recognize in the audience, Dean Karen, for smart cities alone. For example, there's Internet of Things, there's emerging risk, there's a lot of technology that can be used that may not be secure to begin with, but is generating a lot of data or also be consuming data. So I'm going to talk about this is something I've talked about in the past, and I want to revisit that the types of warfare that we have in the world today, and that each one of these can be leveraged, I would say, by cybersecurity, and also the relation to data that I talked about. And why is that? Let's very quickly, let me take a look at conventional warfare. We were thinking has always been using nation state to nation state. It's using weapons, using military weapons, and it's very obvious that somebody is attacking or is using force or using arms. But the kind of data-based warfare that is possible now is going down to, let me go left to right, anti-clockwise, technical. You have the ability to collect data on companies or systems, such as through intellectual property theft. What is the differentiator? What is the basic way of creating value, whether it's a pharmaceutical, as we've seen in time of COVID, health purposes, intellectual property theft. If everything is stored in data, in systems, this becomes a value add for the perpetrators as well, correct? Or the nation states, whatever that might be. Technical, then we talk about cyber. So, sorry, let me just go back. Cyber, obviously, if this is the biggest new frontier, and one of the elements that I have talked about in the past is as the form factor of storing data gets smaller and becomes a target, right? Such as a chip, we've seen the Spectre attack. That is the paradox of cyber warfare, that the attack surface, the smaller it has become, the wider the implications of where it can be attacked from. So this is something really noteworthy and to think about. Where are our risks coming from? It can be down at a semiconductor level. It can be and everything that goes on top of that, which is the operating system, the devices, the applications, and it is a very hard problem to solve on its own, even without massive amounts of data and massive complexity of those applications, such as AI applications. I'm just going to quickly talk about economic aid. That is something, we're familiar with the Silk Road, Beltway, Silk Road approach that China had adopted for, well, it's really being used for. One example I'd like to give of that is how they're leveraging their giving economic aid, and it is a type of warfare, or bestowing favor, for example, to Sri Lanka, which has a lot of ports right next to India, and it is right in the water, right? It has, they gave them support for infrastructure, gave other countries support for infrastructure, and now those countries are tethered to them. If they cannot pay the financial aid back, then it's a question of, okay, if you cannot pay it back, this is what we would like to get in return. So just any example, please feel free to ask questions or comment as we're going. But these are examples of types of warfare which can really become a very important part of, as we are seeing in the Chinese strategy, to really play a bells and whistles kind of approach to very holistic strategy. And I'm a strategist. I told you I admire it, but not in the way you would think, right? So I'm going to go ahead, but this is really something, a psychological way of warfare, actually. Let me just really quickly talk about that. Because this is where I feel and I see social media playing an extremely important part, where if you get access to the data, what kind of manipulation and access, as well as psychological manipulation, is possible. And this is not just for their own citizens, right? This is, I give an example of TikTok, I'll come back to that. So really going just down to history, let me just make sure we have enough time, because I might just not be able to finish the AI completely here of how AI is being leveraged. I'm still talking about the type of warfare and their how impressive it has been in terms of let me just move this. What they're in 2018, China. Let me make this short. There was an internet, there was cloud traffic to Google Cloud, which got hijacked. And so there was an outage where Google customers, who were using the cloud, there was no traffic going to those destinations. And the reason was that it was found to be rerouted to ISPs in China, in Russia, China, and Nigeria. And it lasted for 1.5 hours. And the way it was made possible is that China Telecom had a American subsidiary. In fact, they're the only ISP that is owned by a nation state that the USA has, or most other countries has. It is a very dangerous tool to give to someone, or a system to give access to, because everybody is not encrypting their traffic, for example, when they connect their company's networks, okay, to the ISPs. So this is an extremely, extremely smart thing to do for a country. They have Chinese Telecom covers basically all major ISP exchange points. And they have 8 POPs in the US and 10 overall in North America. And also it has POPs all over the world, which is how ISPs work. So as you can tell, this is not something that is a trivial fact in a cybersecurity strategy, especially for a country. And I have talked, I presented conferences, security conferences, and attend a lot. I had brought this up as a question, didn't really get a good answer from some of the three-letter agencies on this. I'm sure they're working on it. I'm just saying that I was surprised as a professional. I'm quickly go through this, but so this is from 2013. Mandiant had done a report that China Telecom in China, a lot of companies have operations there, right? A lot of companies have locations, and they have services and products and manufacturing plants, et cetera, in China. And as far as 2013, going back to 13, all the traffic that goes in and out of China goes over China Telecom, which is owned by China government, and therefore they potentially have access to the information you're seeing on the screen. So now let me go back to where we are with AI and why I'm raising this as a concern. Talked about China's approach in 1990. There were 2 Chinese generals. Okay, they wrote a book called Unrestricted Warfare, and after the Gulf War, which had demonstrated the military superiority of US, and Chinese realized that they didn't have enough military capabilities. Why is it important? Because they talked about the high dependence on US technology and how US was able to pull this feat off of going into a desert, hundreds of miles into a desert, and take out do the attack, the Gulf War, the Black something attack. I don't have the number right now. But they were able to pull this off without any troops on the ground. And they realized that this is a dependence of US on their technology, and they could use cyber war to remove that advantage. Okay. Now, fast forward to 2015, and I showed you some of the PLA initiated reforms, which led to the kind of charges that I was talking about for espionage, how they were getting into computer networks and stealing data and etc. So now let's fast forward to where we are now of China. How can they use AI for launching a massive cyber attack? Where are they with all their extremely extensive kind of a network with their the Silk Road initiative I was talking about, for example, just that. I'm going to go into some AI specific data of. So let's start with Kai-Fu Lee, who is a really important figure in China on the subject of AI. He was heading Google's AI division in China. And according to Rajiv Malhotra, I'll give his book here, AI and the Future of Power. He compares China's internet entrepreneurs to the gladiators that fought to their deaths in ancient Rome's Colosseum, which means they are really, it's not a go to work and finish at the end of the day 9 to 5 kind of mentality, as you can tell from that, right? Just at a very simple level. Well, that's the people aspect and the mindset. And also, China has created national key research and development plans, which has a large focus on AI. And going with that strategic approach I was talking about, they like to keep everything inside the country instead of sharing that. For example, their AI symposiums, AI summits. China's approach has really been to keep their data and their development more on for their own purpose. If you look at this also, the EU-China co-funding mechanism, they have a project they started with the EU, and I'll let you go to the website, take a look at it yourself. I'd like to kind of get a better understanding of when there is research and innovation, is it shared? Is it, how much is shared and where is it stored? And I'll tell you why I'm concerned about that. Let's take a look at this Pawn to Own, which is a global hacking, bragging rights, and has a price attached to it for hackers. So companies will have layout challenges, and whoever wins it, they have a ability to not only get a prize, but also be recognized for their superiority in the area. So in 2017, this Pawn to Own is such a competition. And for years, Chinese hackers were the most dominant forces. Then Qihu 360 CEO, he convinced the Chinese government to host a similar hacking event, and that gave rise to Tianfu. Now, the idea was that anything the hackers are doing should be kept internal to the country instead of sharing it with the outside world. Their cup this year prize money is 1.5 million equivalent. But here's the catch: it's not just for Chinese, though. It's still an international event. So so they have the ability to figure out how to kind of really leverage that data. The inaugural event, the one I'm referring to here, in 2018 was won by the researcher. I have his name here. I'm not going to pronounce that. And so he demonstrated how to take control of even the most up-to-date iPhones. Okay. And if anybody's interested, you can obviously look into what these details are. And the remote control attacker could take over any iPhone that visited a page that he had created with malicious code. Okay. Call it chaos. And the idea was you go to a web page and you can obviously to spy on a large number of people. That is what I have listed out here. Apple did fix the bug, and Google's threat analysis group found that they were seeing attacks with this in the wild. So clearly it was not just, centered and just used for the, this event only, right? Which is the hacking event. So the idea is it's not easy to even talk about all the implications then, where you're not only not sharing now with the rest of the world, but you're keeping it and you don't know what else could be an issue. So going back to NPR's report, you might have seen about how the SolarWinds attack that was attributed to China was very, very significant in terms of cybersecurity. And we are looking at the infiltration into areas where there is going to be a lot of, including the DoD, et cetera, where the way they pulled it off and what the presence was is significant, very significant, not just for at the national state level, but also at the private enterprise level. Again, I like to highlight the fact that this is breached data, which doesn't only include PII, right? If you're looking at the presence, if you go to my website, in fact, even this is something I created 5 years ago. You'll see how Nortel was compromised by Huawei, and they stole it was completely attributed to Huawei, not Huawei in its current form, but the founder of Huawei, which is now the largest telecom in the world, and how they had a presence on Nortel's network, stole the IP property, intellectual property, and started their own telecom company for advantage, but the parent company was out of business. Let me just check on time. Okay, doing fine. Okay, any questions before I continue? Okay. So I'm going to go back to TikTok. What is the cyber warfare I talked about? One of them includes psychological warfare. I want to talk about one thing, which is this affects me and a lot of everybody out there who has kids or knows children, right? And so this one is very personal to a lot of parents globally. And I think one thing we need to be really, really cognizant of is why am I just calling out TikTok? After all social media platforms, Facebook, Google, whoever has a social media platform, I'm not even going to who all they are, TikTok, Instagram, they're all collecting data, right? And they are all very sensitive data. But the reason, and TikTok has the following information. Data which is coming from the SIM card, IP addresses, GPS, how people are using TikTok, and all the content you create. Well, that content people are creating is, a lot of it is, I have statistics on, mostly it is a lot of age group from teenagers, for example, and it's creating videos, right? And there is an article that I encourage you to read from Wall Street on what all is it doing, right? It's taking your pictures, your videos, your expressions. And if you look at over here, it is user generated content. But what is not very obvious here is when you take an image, for example, when you take a video, you can create a deep fake. And in fact, TikTok actually allows you to create deep fakes, but that's not the deep fake I'm talking about, which is a concern. Any of this information and all of this information, especially when it's combined, is a very, very big concern for security, for psychological well-being of the consumers here in this case, and also for general creating of harmful, not even content, but harmful reach out. Because if anybody has used this app, for example, and not just TikTok, I would say, but they take a look at the AI algorithms that TikTok has, for example. Within 8 seconds of a person using that app, they are able to get an idea of what they're interested in. This is not your mom's internet anymore, right? This is, or an app. This is a very significant thing. And what we are, the other thing I'd like to call out, the Chinese government has taken an ownership stake in ByteDance, okay? They're the company who owns TikTok. Now, it's not, I'm not saying that at this point that China or Beijing has the ownership, or does it directly affect TikTok, which is supposed to be a separate company. But the development could prompt debate whether it is a problem for a security risk. Because if you look at the kind of data that is being collected, sorry, let's go into the wrong slide. This is between this, right, the kind of data that's being collected by a legitimate app, and when you're looking at the breach data that has been attributed to the Chinese Communist Party, which according to William Anina, right, is they have information on, basically financial information on every American adult. So I would stop there for a pause for effect, right? That's the point I want to make. We have breach data, and then we have data that we are collecting and we are storing. And if you look at TikTok's policy, they clearly say, privacy policy, that we are collecting videos and we are collecting everything that you're giving consent to. Now, how many teenagers or how many people do you know who actually read everything that is being given in a disclaimer because you want to use the app? So this is, a lot of data, and it is, you know, causing concern to me anyway. Weaponizing biotech. This is a no-brainer, right? This is extremely, I don't even know what to call it, because this goes beyond psychological warfare, beyond what we even know as possible for warfare. This is like, I was talking about creating a semiconductor becoming the new form factor for cyber warfare, and really expanding the surface. When you take genes and you take the biotechnology facet of this, there is no end to this, right? This is becoming a much more significant thing we have to be concerned about. When one of the things that I was alluding to in that article, and I referenced it here, is Beijing Genomics has established an edge in cheap gene sequencing. And the amount of data that exists in genes is not something you would be categorizing as PII by any means. So, and there is a wealth of information that is there. So what happens when you have, for example, even DNA kits that you get, people are putting in to getting DNA kits to see who their ancestors are, for example, goes back to the company, and the companies who are collecting that may not even have the right technology to or risk posture to know what is a risk and how are they going to protect it. So anyhow, coming back to the risk here, before the establishment of the gene bank, it was stored, gene data they produced was stored in 3 international databases. So this is noteworthy in the US, in the UK, and Japan. However, on their own site, they've mentioned it is of great importance to preserve gene data in the country of its origin, as such data can be regarded as part of national strategy. So that's kind of revealing what their actions are revealing here. Okay, I won't go into all the things I've called out from there, but basically the concern for China, for USA, is that they do have access to genetic information of Americans, and BGI has been pursuing a range of partnerships, including with the University of California and Philadelphia, etc. So again, I go back to what the Chinese approach has been, or the Chinese government's approach has been, that they protect their government, their data, their cybersecurity laws are very onerous, and they do have, make it impossible actually to ignore. If you want to do business there, you have to follow what they are doing, what their requirements, you have to align with their cybersecurity posture. But when it goes out, that when they're investing, they're using, this is how money becomes the monster, the benign monster, right? Because you can leverage money for basically inviting Europe to participate in that website I showed you for their AI initiative. You can fund governments and hold them kind of hostage if they don't pay. They pay back the infrastructure investments that they're doing. So it is, and we took a look at some of the apps, right? That clearly they're clear where we're not paying attention to what we are capturing, where this data is, how it's being collected, and by whom is really the point I like to stop at. So this is very, I'd like to open it up for questions, but the the takeaway from here is we are extremely sensitive to our privacy and our security, but what are we doing about it? We are not taking, in my opinion, and that's why I worked with Lisa, Women in Cybersecurity, to talk about how we can combine the two, right? How do you advance trust in AI? Because without AI, you cannot make sense of a lot of this data that's being collected. But it's not a question of how do you, it's not just a question of when you create AI that you have ethics and fairness in code, which is a big problem. And nothing about AI lends itself to an easy conversation, okay? Everything is complex. How do you simplify it? We need to have trust in AI. We need to know what we are doing. And this is something we have to do if we could do it, stop development, stop everything, and take a look at the national security, the economic security, look at things strategically without just letting, we don't have anyway. The point is, historically, we have done that. Historically, we have created systems and then we go and see what their security privacy needs are. In this case, the need for security is not just cybersecurity. Need is a more strategic look at what are we doing, how are we doing it, and where do we want to go? Because this is clearly not where we want to go and hand over our lives to nation states that may not have our best interests in heart. So this is my concern. This is my call to action, if you want to call it that. I'm saying we have so much to gain from AI, but we also have very narrow scope when it comes to, and even as Americans, we're looking at security and privacy. Oh, this is something that we are not going to give up. Meanwhile, there is no way to really make sure that we are protecting the right things. So without that, there is no value in having the wrong kind of reactions to what we are saying we need to protect. Well, I don't know if we are protecting, if we know what to protect. And without that, it's not just our social security number and our name and address. We absolutely have to protect that. So companies are not even doing that right. And yet we are going into AI systems where we're collecting so much data and we're clearly not creating it in the right way. So I'd like to stop here and thank you very much for joining.